All right, so we're going to start looking at the second artwork and how to get started with that. Same thing, you need to have a very clear focal point for your second artwork. And then this one's going to focus on a few principles of design and a few elements of art. There's obviously a lot more than the few that I have listed here, but I did create two PowerPoints that are found on the website underneath this video where you're able to click through and see all of them. And I definitely encourage you to use more than what I'm going to be going over. Especially if you're in the 2D portfolio, check out those PowerPoints because they're great to know and great to use. However, I pulled the few that I thought were the most important that I think will really help your projects and take them to the next level if you can continuously incorporate at least these in your projects. And then we're going to also use at least two found objects in your piece. All right, so the first one that we're going to focus on is balance. That's just keeping your image proportioned and balanced on either side, whether it's asymmetrical or symmetrical. So if you look at this image on the left, this is more of an asymmetrical balance where it's not an exact replica on either side, but there's not one side that has more weight than the other. So this top one has a bunch of those stars in the background, and then to evenly weight that out, they put one large star instead. So you could do lots of small objects on one side, and then maybe on the other, maybe the side with your focal point, you do a larger object to equal out that weight. So you're basically just trying to distribute the weight evenly. And then this image with the tree is more of a symmetrical balance where it's exactly the same on either side. So think about how you can balance things out. So if you make one mark in your project or put one piece or shape somewhere, try to balance that out somewhere else or on the other side of your piece. Here's another example of balance where you have the focal point in the front here, so that the green tree on the left. And then even though there's not a green tree on the right, this piece still feels weighted evenly. It still is balanced because they have the bigger moon and the brighter light over on the right side, so that helps to weight it out a little bit. And then they also have the swirl, or Vincent van Gogh put this larger swirl here that's off to the right side as well, which helps to balance it, and has way less and smaller stars on the left over here. So that's evenly weighted, even though it's more of an asymmetrical balance. So you still can have a clear focal point, and the focal point can still be larger, but try to maybe do a lot of smaller shapes of something else to weight that balance out and just evenly distribute things. If you have too much weight in one area, it's going to take away from your piece because it's going to be hard to stop focusing on that one area and see what else is going around the image. So try to balance things out. All right, so we're going to move on to movement and rhythm. Movement is important so that you have movement visually in your piece. So if you are looking at a piece, you can see where the viewer's eye will start, where the eye will jump to next, and it keeps moving around the piece. So the more movement that you have, the longer that viewer is going to be able to keep their eye on your artwork and look at it and really take in everything that's going on and start to think a little bit more about your work versus a piece without movement where they just look at it, the eye doesn't move around anywhere, so they move on to the next. So really important to have movement to keep that viewer's eye focused on your piece. Here you can clearly see the movement where you start at the start of the line here and you move throughout. So using just a continuous line to direct someone's eye will help to create movement. You could also create movement and rhythm by having colors and things kind of spaced out. So on this, there's yellow off to the side here, and then there's some yellow that's kind of spaced in different areas where the eye can start, and then just jump from that color where it's located throughout the piece. Here's another example of that. So there's not one continuous line that goes throughout the entire image, but your eye does jump around. And that movement is created through using shapes that are the same color or the same shape and repeating those. So you have these yellow shapes here. Even though this isn't exactly the same, it's similar, so your eye kind of jumps over here. And then the direction of the shapes as well. So all of these are almost acting like arrows that continue that movement throughout the piece. So you have this long line that comes in, your eye moves down to this one that points off to the side, and then you can jump to these triangles that are pointing back in towards this blue shape. And then since there's another blue shape over here, your eye jumps to it. So just think about where someone's eye is going to travel and try to intentionally place shapes and objects to move their eye through your piece. Here's another example of that where you have all of these shapes starting to move and have that repetition to help draw that focus to the focal point and then around to other areas as well. Which leads us into repetition. Repetition does feed on having that movement, so it feeds on our last one we were looking at, but having that repetition is going to unify things, which is another one that we'll talk about, so you don't have too much going on. And then it really, again, helps to show the eye where to jump from part to part. So just try to repeat different shapes, different colors, textures, whatever you have, try to repeat. So in this one, there's a lot of those different objects, found objects that are repeated throughout, and that helps to jump the eye around. Like you have this in the background with the pink, and then it's over here, and then there's obviously the circles repeated. All right, unity is the next one we're going to look at. And really, the first two, if you're following those, you should have unity. But it's basically, first of all, not using too many different colors. So maybe pick some sort of color scheme, pick 3 or 4 colors to stick to and not exceed that. And then repeating them throughout. So if you make a blue mark in just one spot and don't put it anywhere else, it's not going to feel very unified because you only have that color in one spot. So if we put that blue in a few other spots as well, it's going to help pull the entire piece together and unify it. So same thing with this, we have that repetition of the same sort of shapes and designs, and then the repetition of color that unifies it, and there's not too much going on. So keep it simple, and that will help to unify your piece. All right, texture is a pretty obvious one, whether it's an actual texture or a visual texture. But think about how to create texture in this piece that you're working on. So maybe you're grabbing leaves from outside and you're using an actual texture on your piece. Or maybe you're doing cross-hatching in the corner to create texture. Or the way that you're applying paint is using thick paint to show that texture of the paint, like this sunflower here. All right, so those were the few that I wanted you guys to focus on. There's obviously a lot more that we didn't talk about, but I think those are the few that really stand out that should be used in pretty much every piece of art that you create, no matter what portfolio that you're in. This image is just really great to show a lot being used in one. So you have unity because of the same color that's being used in the background, and then the shirt, the sunglasses, this same green color is being repeated. You have movement because of the direction that these leaves are pointing. They're all pointing towards our focal point, helping to move the eye throughout the piece. Same with the scarf, it's moving your eye around to the mountains and everything else going on. There's plenty of patterns with that repetition. And then we didn't talk about emphasis, but just making sure that your focal point stands out, whether it's a dark color on a white background, something like that. All right, so again, make sure that you're using all of those pieces that we talked about in your second work, and then we're going to move on to the third when those are finished and turned in.